on. And we'll go to our program guest now. It's the Independent MP for New England, Tony Windsor, who joins us from Tamworth. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Barry.
The Prime Minister is still short of the numbers that you'll need to get the flood levy through. What's troubling you about it?
Well, I'm still working through this. I have some difficulties with the imposition of a levy being the correct mechanism to raise the money to help the Queensland situation. Obviously, the money will come from somewhere, and eventually it'll come from the taxpayer one way or the other. But for the life of me, I can't understand why some of the budgetary reductions couldn't be looked at, or probably, preferably, in my case, a small deficit be run in terms of the budget. There seems to be this preoccupation with being back in surplus by 2012-13, and I don't think that's necessarily the correct course. I think when a disaster like this comes along, there's very good reason to slip into deficit.
Well, if that's true, then, if you think that she's doing this as a political imperative, how could you then support it in the end?
Well, I'm not saying I'm supporting it. I'm thinking about the various alternatives that are there, but I'd have to say, to be quite honest, that I'm not leaning towards it. I'm probably leaning against it.
And would you agree, though, that it's probably, even though the government's going to lose votes along the way, this one is important. It goes to the heart of their authority and their capability for doing things and getting things done.
Yes, but this is a hung parliament, and I have a vote within it. Won't be my vote that necessarily determines the outcomes of the government policy in this particular case, but I have to think through my vote in relation to this particular issue, and that's my first concern. The place it puts the government in terms of other votes is not my direct concern at this particular moment.
OK, Tony Abbott only recently suggested you should review your support for the government. You seem to be a bit offended by that, but doesn't it make sense to just periodically just take a look at the situation, take a step back and see how things are going?
Well, I think most people were doing that anyway, and I don't think we really needed Tony's advice in relation to that. And I think he had another motive in mind. That we've kissed and made up through the week. I had a meeting with Tony, and we're friends again. Well, I don't think we're ever not friends, but anyway, that episode's over.
Well, he said he had a very productive week. Perhaps that's what he was talking about, his conversation with you. After several months now, though, of the minority government, are you more or less persuaded that the government will run its full term?
I think it will. I think people were saying prior to Christmas that it'd all be over by Christmas. They're not saying that now. Obviously, there'll be the politics of the day because the numbers are very tight. That's by definition. So there will be the games played and the various media events run. But I think the government's putting itself in a position now where it's embarking on some long-term programs, the National Broadband Network, the Murray-Darling arrangements. That's a big thing in itself. The climate change debate. There's some pretty big topics out there, and on top of that, we've got these spate of disasters that have occurred right throughout Australia, and obviously that's taken the attention of the media and the nation. I think you could see that in the footage that you had of the parliamentarians. A very, very emotional time for everybody, and so there's a big year in front of us. To answer your direct question, I think there's a very good chance the government will run its course.
And of course, if that happens, that's in the interest of the independents, isn't it? Because that prolongs the period during which you have considerable influence.
Well, not necessarily. People will argue that if there's cases of maladministration or corruption, I'm sure all the crossbenchers would look at those things very seriously. But I don't think we're going to suddenly change the government, as Tony Abbott was suggesting on the back of a flood levy. I think we've got to sort of think through those things independently of what the government's particular position is. It's the Parliament's position that counts, and this is a Parliament of the people, not a Parliament of the executive. So I think everybody's got to really adjust their sights a little bit in relation to this particular Parliament. I think there's some fairly exciting times ahead.
Okay, I want to ask you about the youth allowance. The Coalition has sponsored a bill that boosts payments by more than $300 million, and that's designed, of course, to give a better deal to kids in the bush. Is that something you'd be tempted to support?
Well, I've been supportive of